Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Changemaker Podcast. I have a very special guest with me today. She's Samantha Cassetty. Samantha is a food and wellness expert with a private nutrition and counseling practice. She has a very positive approach to healthy eating, empowering people with smart strategies and advice. Samantha has served as a director for Good Housekeeping, a director of nutrition for Good Housekeeping, a nutrition correspondent for Drop 5 Pounds with Good Housekeeping as well, and Cooking Channel. She's contributed to the best-selling book like 7 Years Younger and Sugar Shock. She consults with health-focused brands and conducts workshops regularly. She also writes for Today.com and NBCnews.com. Samantha holds a bachelor's degree from Vanderbilt University, a master's degree in clinical nutrition from Boston University, and lives in New York with her teenage son. Welcome, Samantha. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
That's great. So let's kick things off by giving our audience an opportunity to get to know you, know a bit about your background and some of the factors that shaped your career trajectory today.
Yeah, so I always knew I wanted to write about nutrition. It was something that I wanted to do. I didn't really want to be just in clinical. I really wanted to reach a big audience because I was so passionate about all of the benefits of nutrition, and I felt like people needed to, hear reasonable, approachable information. So I got started straight out of grad school at Good Housekeeping magazine as an assistant in the nutrition department. And I spent a couple years there, and then I left and worked in other publishing roles. At one point, I was the executive editor for southbeachdiet.com, which was the biggest like sort of diet back in the early 2000s. Um, and from there, I went back to Good Housekeeping as the nutrition director and spent a number of years in that role, and just got some great opportunities like contributing to the New York Times bestseller, appearances on the Today Show, the nutrition correspondent job on the Cooking Channel. So it really opened up many opportunities for me and led me to where I am now.
That's great. That's really great. But were there some things when you were growing up in your childhood that really drew you into food and health as a whole?
I think so. The funny thing about my childhood is in my grandfather actually owned a candy business. So
Mhm.
my grandfather and my family's business was actually a candy company. Um, and they made a very popular candy called Whoppers, which is still very popular today, although my family is no longer in the business. And so I grew up in a house with lots and lots and lots of sweets. We always had sweets in the house. We always had just tons of candy and desserts, and healthy eating was not a huge priority for my family. And I think that after college, I was cooking for myself and taking care of myself, and I was noticing the benefits of eating better. And it really just inspired me to want to like learn more about it, study more about it, and help empower other people with tools to help themselves feel better.
That's great. And of course, informing people through channels they're used to, channels they would regularly tune on and just for entertainment is also a very powerful tool. Something we should have more of today because realize that the more informed and educated people that are out there sharing information, the better our population will be in terms of getting access to reliable information easily. So one of the things that I just wanted to dive into a little bit is talking about your time at either today.com or NBCnews.com and how you saw your role um, in terms of educating and empowering people. How do you think we can have more of those opportunities for people? Because by that I mean people that are as trained as you are, having the opportunity to talk broadly and speak to a large group of people on a regular basis, informing them and educating them about food and health. How do you think this type of opportunities can become more readily available? And what do you think, as an individual in that that's held that type of role, what do you think is the biggest benefit of having people well informed like you in that spaces?
Yeah, that's a great question because unfortunately there's so much misinformation that people have access to. So social media, can be great for a lot of things. It can give you great recipe ideas and help you keep up with your friends' kids, but it's definitely a landmine when it comes
Mm,
to health information or misinformation. And you're always like stepping into, potentially dangerous territory over on social media platforms. And it's because everybody has the ability to self publish and speak to huge audiences. So when I was coming through the ranks in publishing, people were getting all of their nutrition and health information from either news media or mainstream media. And in mainstream media, we had a fact checking process where there was, I couldn't say anything without it going through a rigorous checking process. So
mm,
supporting documents, all the original research. And that just does not really happen today. And it certainly doesn't happen on social media for the most part. There are definitely
mm,
obviously exceptions to that. But
mm,
I think you know, the opportunity exists for people to for healthcare experts to write for various outlets, but I think at the same time, because there's no fact checking and people haven't been brought up with that um, sort of education, it can still be tricky to find accurate information online.
mm,
And
mm,
you know every expert has a point of view,
mhm,
and that point of view can be very valuable, but it doesn't always make it factual. And
mhm,
so I think we have to be really careful about giving people factual information, making sure that it's well documented, and really clear for readers about how to implement. And that's the one thing that I really learned working at a magazine is information is one thing, and it's awesome to have great information out there, but knowing doesn't always translate into doing, which we know
mhm,
because we know that everybody wakes up in the morning wanting to make healthy decisions and taking care of their bodies, but it doesn't always translate to doing those things. And
mhm.
so we want to provide content that is serviceable to readers so that they can actually maybe implement some of the steps.
That's great. That's really good. And that is a very good segue to my next question, actually, on misconceptions about nutrition and wellness. It's a very important topic, and everybody has an opinion on it. So definitely, there are so many um, misconceptions out there. Do you mind sharing some of the common ones that you've seen and how we can debunk those?
Yeah, I think carbohydrates are like one of the biggest, sources of like misconceptions because carbohydrates is a big category. It includes fruits, it includes vegetables. Nuts have some carbohydrates. So dairy foods have some carbohydrates. And so um, carbohydrates get a really bad rap. What what people should be concerned about and limiting is the ultra processed carbohydrates. So those are refined grains, things like white bread, white crackers, sugary cereals, added sugars, which is another form of carbohydrates. We certainly do want to start to limit those things, but there are great benefits to consuming things like whole grains, beans, fruits and vegetables. And so I think, as a category, they've been sort of shamed and put down, but they're really misunderstood. And the other
Mm,
thing I will say about carbohydrates is even the healthiest ones
mm,
are team players. So we tend to be very carb centric in our eating habits, and we might eat carbs with a side of something where it should be the reverse. It should be like vegetables and your protein with a side of carbs.
mm. Okay. All right. Thanks for sharing that. And a lot of people have busy schedules. They're juggling a number of things together. And and sometimes people will tell you, oh, I can't pay attention to food and nutrition right now because there's just so much going on. I'll pick something on the go and just take care of it. So if a busy professional is listening today, what are some of the practical strategies that they can adopt to maintain a healthy diet and still be productive and meet all their obligations, the regular obligations?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of certain convenience foods. So if your budget allows, I really embrace pre-cut vegetables. Every supermarket has them now. You could buy broccoli, Brussels sprouts, butternut squash, shredded Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, and there are, various other vegetables that have already been, cleaned and cut. And it really takes all the prep work out. So you just sort of like stick them in the oven. You could do something else while they're cooking. Um, I also am a huge proponent of frozen fruits and vegetables, where again, all the prep work has been done for you. The great thing about frozen produce is that it is there for you. It's not going to spoil or go bad. And so if you don't have anything fresh, you can always pull it out of the freezer. And there's data that suggests that when people have frozen fruits and vegetables in their freezer, they are more likely to hit fruit and vegetable targets. And I think people don't understand that you can actually cook frozen vegetables in the same way that you can cook fresh vegetables. So, like roasting and sauteing and stir frying. So that's one of my the big thing, one of the biggest conveniences that I lean on to make it easier to eat healthy on those busy nights. I also am a huge proponent of leftovers. Like if I'm going through the trouble of cooking, I want to make enough so that I can eat it on a second night and maybe even a third night. I'm also a really big fan of what I call component cooking. So taking some base ingredients like a batch of quinoa and chicken breast and having them sort of like unseasoned, but repurposing them over the next few days with different seasonings. So easy, healthy condiments and seasonings like store-bought pesto or salsa or uh, sriracha or, um, Greek or Italian seasoning, lemon, things like that that can add flavor to your meals with those base components that make them different from night to night.
Mm. Thank you. Sometimes you've talked about a lot of specific foods and food types that they can make in the evening, but sometimes people have food allergies and intolerances that impact their overall health. And how could people easily identify and manage some of those intolerances, especially those that develop later? There are times that people can actually eat and enjoy some meals, and then later on, things change and they realize that they no longer tolerate some of the meals they enjoyed previously. What's the best approach or what's the best advice you could give people in this category?
Yeah, so first I want to just point out the difference between an intolerance and an allergy. So a food allergy is an immune response and it can be life-threatening, and people can have that response even to like a small trace of that food. And so they really have to completely avoid that food. And that is diagnosed by a doctor, and the only treatment for that is food avoidance. You have to avoid that
Mhm,
food. An
mhm,
intolerance is more like a digestive response. And so you are not digesting that food well for a variety of reasons. Oftentimes, you might not have the enzymes or sufficient amount of the enzymes. So the most common intolerance is called lactose intolerance, and it's when you can't digest the dairy foods properly, and so it results in some digestive issues. And so that's a big difference between the two of them. And there are other various intolerances. The A leading way that people identify intolerances is through an elimination diet. So they eliminate the suspected triggers, and see if their symptoms improve. But I caution people to do this only under the supervision of a dietitian, or a doctor, because it sounds pretty harmless, right? Taking some things out of your diet, but it is actually not without harm. You might be eliminating foods that are perfectly healthy and not troubling you. And so you're unnecessarily restricting your diet. And also, anytime that you're like severely restricting your diet, you're at risk for more food obsession, a potential eating disorder or disordered eating, generally an unhealthy relationship with food. And so we really want to enter into elimination diets with caution and thoughtfulness.
Definitely. It's always good when we talk about food and especially food and health and people making changes to their diet to put all those guidelines in place so that people take the right precautions. So when you think about eating, you've heard a lot about mindful eating. And what is it? Why is it important? And how can people be more mindful when they eat? I mean, if it's really beneficial.
Yeah, mindful eating is one of my favorite tools because it's something that you can do anywhere, and it actually doesn't involve restricting or even like changing your food choices. So, the basic idea behind mindful eating is that you are staying present while you eat. And this can help you with better digestion, more enjoyment and satisfaction from your meals. And it can also help you eat to the point of comfort instead of
Mm,
discomfort. And so, like, I think the first thing to do is to ask yourself, um, how much you'd feel comfortable eating, and then serve yourself that amount. That's like sort of the first step. And then it's always, you always want to plate your food. So, or put it on a device. So let's say you decided you want a handful of nuts. You've asked yourself how much would feel comfortable to eat. Rather than just keeping them in your palm of your hand, put them even on a napkin or something, so that you can put them down between bites. And then, it's important to chew thoroughly and to take your time eating.
mm,
And this is a big part of it. You want to sort of make mental notes of how your food tastes. What's the texture like? You kind of want to label it in your head. So if we're talking about nuts, maybe they're salty or crunchy. Food could be earthy or sweet. It could have an icy texture. It could have a smooth texture. So you want to sort of make mental notes so that you're really tuned into what you're eating. And then you also want to assess sort of along the way how you're filling up. So as you're beginning to fill up, you want to ask yourself, will you be comfortable eating a few more bites? Because again, like when you're present and tuned in to how your body is responding to food, it will help you it will help you eat to the point of satisfaction instead of like overeating or being uncomfortable after a meal. Um, but one thing I want to point out is one of the biggest principles of mindful eating is to eat without distractions. And so that means like turning off the computer or the TV or not checking emails while you're doing the other things that I mentioned. And people might come after me at this, but I always tell my clients um, that we don't want to throw out all the principles if we cannot eliminate the distraction. So this is not an all or nothing situation. I think that it is a lot more approachable to do what I call mindful eating light, so that you're still doing those things, even if you're checking emails or, eating lunch as you work. I think you can still get a lot of the benefits of mindful eating, even if you have some distractions.
mm. That's great. And one of the things about things like this as well is people try very hard to, well, maybe not very hard. Some people try really hard, some people not. But one thing that some people talk about a lot more today is knowing what is good for you and being able to easily walk through the stores and confidently pick items that you know will be beneficial for you and your loved ones. So food labeling is something that should help with that, helping people get informed about what they're about to purchase or what they're about to eat. Uh, but it's not always that straightforward. Do you mind sharing a little bit about how people can navigate food labeling and make informed choices when shopping for groceries?
Yeah, so the priorities for me on a food label are protein and fiber because that can give you a sense of how filling the food is going to be. And so, like, we want to see that there's some protein or fiber in there. And then also sodium, saturated fat, and added sugar. So, we want to limit foods that have excessive amounts of those types of nutrients. And the one thing you need to know about a food label is that it is tied to the serving size that is listed on the food label. So let's say it's a half a cup. If you are to eat more or less than a half a cup, you have to do the math and adjust all of those numbers. Um, but I think that the nutrition facts panel itself is limited because it doesn't tell you the quality of the food that you're eating or where those nutrients such as protein and fiber are coming from. And so when we're thinking about making choices and trying to limit um, ultra processed foods, we can really learn more by looking at the ingredient list. What kinds of ingredients are in that food? So, are the is the fiber coming from whole foods like nuts or oats or brown rice? Or is it coming from like a manufactured type of fiber that is added? You know, is the protein coming from a natural whole food source, or is it coming from like a soy protein isolate, or you know, a dis- manufactured type of protein? And so we want to limit the foods that have excessive added sugars, sodium, and saturated fats, as well as those heavily processed foods, which the red flags for those would be zero calorie sweeteners, artificial colors, flavors, preservatives, and you know, some of those manufactured ingredients that you wouldn't really find in your home kitchen.
Hmm. Okay. So if people are thinking today, you're a registered dietitian and they are wondering today, okay, what is the relationship between diet and my health, especially when it comes to mental health? And how can food impact your mood and your overall well-being? Do you mind sharing a bit of insights into that?
Yeah, so this is actually one of my favorite topics because I think people tend to think of nutrition as offsetting some far off illness that's way in the future and you might not be thinking about it, but it actually can play a role in your mood. And I think that's really exciting to know. So, for example, studies show that eating more fruits and vegetables can affect your happiness levels, and that the benefits of adding just one serving a day can boost your happiness level incrementally up to 8 servings a day. And in this 2016 study, they showed that people who went from eating no fruits and vegetables to that 8 serving a day, sort of like with plateaus, their happiness levels improved to the degree that it would be like going from unemployed to employed. So, like the stress of unemployment, you think about being unhappy to being, you know, happy and um, more at ease. And so, like, that's a big benefit that you can get from just eating fruits and vegetables. Um, Other studies have shown that the Mediterranean diet, so a diet that emphasizes whole grains, nuts, beans, seeds, extra virgin olive oil, and limits sort of like red meat and added sugars, that a diet like that can be protective against depression and potentially anxiety. So there's some promising research there. So I would say, you know, a healthy eating pattern really does boost your mental health and well-being. Um, and that an unhealthy eating pattern can do the opposite. So studies really show that added sugars and a diet that is high in added sugars might be linked to some of these mood disorders.
Hmm. Well, that's really great. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on all these crucial topics with us. And before we move on to talk about you and your practice and how you serve people, there's one thing that I'm really curious about, and that's the role of supplements in diets. Oftentimes, people use supplements, different type of supplement, and it's a very, very huge industry today. Do you mind sharing your thoughts on that in terms of the importance of it or the lack thereof of importance, but what role does it really play at what stages? Is it something that as people grow older they need to pay more attention to? Or is it for people when they're much younger they need to pay attention to where does this fit in on the spectrum and how important is it?
Yeah, so I used to be like, I'm always going to be a food first person because I'm a dietitian. And I used to sort of, in my younger years, think that, you can get everything from your diet. But the truth is that, people need some boosting here and there, and especially at certain points of their life. I like to think of supplements as a case by case basis, in terms of like it's a broad category and, different ones can target different people's needs. But generally speaking, everybody benefits, for example, from vitamin D because vitamin D is so hard to get from food. It is called the sunshine nutrient because it's actually a hormone that gets synthesized when we are exposed to sunlight. However, for a variety of reasons, that process isn't that effective. For example, you wear clothing or sunscreen or the fog or your daylight hours all limit that effectiveness. And so it's better to get it from a supplement. But there's other interesting, there's other times in life where you need a supplement. For example, pregnant women benefit from taking a prenatal vitamin. As people get older, oftentimes women need some additional calcium. And there was just some interesting research about Centrum multivitamins. And I'm just saying the brand name because that was the brand used in the study, that people who took the adult preparation had benefits to their memory and cognition over time. So I think there are cases for supplements, but I will say you cannot out supplement an unhealthy diet. It's an addition to.
Okay, that's really great. Thanks. When people want to work with you, of course, it's you are a registered dietitian, so this is really your space. And I know you have a private practice. Do you mind sharing how people work with you and how they can best connect with you?
Yeah, so I do have a private practice and I work with people one on one. And they can contact me through my website, which is www.samanthacassetty.com, which I'm sure you'll have the spelling of that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Um, and we can have a quick one-on-one call where we can get to know each other and you can see if my style works for you. But I typically, help people. I have a lot of people with just general wellness and, you know, um, just improvements in healthy eating. I've worked with people on weight loss. So those I think are the two like main things. People just want to tweak their diet, they're ready to make some changes and I help them do that. And of course, my approach is really about helping people lean less on ultra processed foods,
Mhm.
learn how to make whole food choices that are tasty, convenient, um, and approachable, and that helping people include more plants and less added sugar. And coming soon, I will be launching a membership program where people will have more access to asking me questions about things like supplements or products in the grocery store. And I'll share meal plans and recipe ideas and tips and information on the latest studies on nutrition. So it'll be a great community and place to connect about health and wellness.
That's good. That's really good. We need as many sources of education as possible from reliable sources. That is definitely needed. Thank you so much for sharing insights with our audience today. Really, really appreciate it. And for everyone that is listening, thank you for tuning in. And until the next time when I bring another exceptional guest your way, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.